Welcome to Interview with a Vampire in a Nutshell. In the novel, a vampire named Louis Dupont du Lac tells his 200-year-long life story to a reporter referred to simply as the boy. In 1791, Louis is a young indigo plantation owner living in Louisiana. Distraught by the death of his pious brother, he seeks death in any way possible. Louis is approached by a vampire named Lestat de Liancourt. Lestat turns Louis into a vampire and the two become immortal companions. Lestat spends time feeding off slaves while Louis feeds from animals. Louis and Lestat are forced to leave when Louis's slaves begin to fear the monsters with which they live and instigate an uprising. Louis sets his own plantation aflame. He slowly comes to terms with his vampire nature, but also becomes increasingly repulsed by what he perceives as Lestat's total lack of compassion for the humans he preys upon. Escaping to New Orleans, Louis feeds off a plague-ridden 5-year-old girl, whom he finds next to the corpse of her mother. Louis begins to think of leaving Lestat and going his own way. Fearing this, Lestat then turns the girl into a vampire daughter for them to give Louis a reason to stay. She's then given the name Claudia. She takes to killing easily, but she begins to realise over time she can never grow up. Claudia blames Lestat for her condition, and after 60 years of living with him, hatches a plot to kill him. Claudia and Louis then dump his body into a nearby swamp. As Louis and Claudia prepare to flee to Europe, Lestat appears, having recovered from Claudia's attack, and attacks them in turn. Louis sets fire to their home and barely escapes with Claudia, leaving a furious Lestat to be consumed by the flames. Arriving in Europe, Louis and Claudia set out to seek out more of their kind. When they reach Paris, they encounter the 400-year-old vampire Armand and his coven at the Théâtre des Vampires. Claudia convinces Louis to turn a Parisian doll-maker, Madeleine, into a vampire to serve as a replacement companion. Louis, Madeleine and Claudia live together for a brief time, but all three are abducted one night by Armand's coven. Lestat arrives, having survived the fire in New Orleans. Armand arrives and releases Louis, but Madeleine and Claudia are burned to death by the rising sun. Louis returns to the theatre later the following night, burning it to the ground and killing all the vampires inside, leaving with Armand. Back in the present, after 200 years, Louis is weary of immortality and of all the pain and suffering to which he has had to bear witness. The reporter, however, seeing only the great powers granted to a vampire, begs to be made into a vampire himself. Angry that his interviewer learned nothing from his story, Louis refuses, attacking the boy and vanishing without a trace. This novel was written by American author Anne Rice and published in 1976. Rice composed the novel shortly after the death of her young daughter Michelle, who served as an inspiration for the child vampire character Claudia. The novel focuses on the abhuman in the form of the vampire, but explores the human side of supernatural forces. Critics have commented on its eroticism and its exploration of immortality. The story links to Dracula, Let the Right One In, and Varney the Vampire in terms of its presentation of vampirism. The erotic undertones link to the stories in the Bloody Chamber. Read Chapter 1. How is the vampire presented? What was the public reaction to the text when it was published? Research Victorian attitudes towards disease and infection.